from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for The Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by major grants from the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.
The continuing production and use of coal is a growing concern to those who own and produce it, to those who depend on it for a living, to those who use it for light and heat, and to those whose health is affected by it. My guest is Patrick C. McGinley, the West Virginia University College of Law Judge Charles Hayden II Professor of Law. Pat, you're back. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We want to talk about the war on coal, and honestly, I'm not sure I know what it is. Can you explain it a little bit?
Well, I'll do my best. The war on coal is really a misnomer. If you want to use the word war, you might say there's a war about coal. It's a war of public relations. It's motivated by politics and the quest for power in Washington. Those who promote the concept of a war on coal attack those in Washington and elsewhere who support mine safety regulation, black lung regulation, air and water pollution regulation. And some of their criticism has merit, and some of it is self-interested and has nothing to do with the protection of coalfield communities or the economies of central Appalachia, where so much of the nation's coal is mined.
If you're going to have a war, you have to have at least two sides. And it does seem as though both sides in this particular dispute are having at each other. As I read material in or about the war on coal, it seems that, frankly, both sides are giving as good as they're getting.
Well, certainly there's a strident, often venomous flavor to the discourse, public discourse, about the place of coal in our economy and the future of coalfield communities. There's no doubt about that. And what's missing is serious consideration, discussion of how we're going to go forward, recognizing that the economically mineable coal in central Appalachia and West Virginia has diminished greatly. We've mined 13 billion tons of coal from West Virginia since the beginning of the 20th century. And the coal that's easy to get is gone. The production of coal in the last 20 years in West Virginia has dropped appreciably in terms of man hours used to produce a ton of coal, and that's because it's harder to reach that coal, and it's more expensive. In fact, interestingly enough, coalfield employment since 2000 has increased over time because more miners are needed to mine hard-to-get coal.
When we talk about the cost of producing coal, though, we tend to just think in economic terms. It costs $1 a ton or $100 a ton or whatever it costs to get particular coal out of the ground. But there are other costs, and that's really where this dispute comes from. It's not just dollar terms. Strip mining, for example, didn't really exist other than just as a way to pick up coal to put in your furnace or in your fireplace to keep the family warm. Then it became a major economic production of coal method. Now we've gone from just what we would refer to as simple strip mining to mountaintop removal, where in a very real sense we're deconstructing major parts of the state. And that's a cost too. And it has effects that I suspect some don't want to consider or talk about.
Well, there are many in politics in the coal industry that don't want to talk about the externalities of coal mining and coal combustion. And what I mean by externalities, I mean they're the costs that are not borne by the companies producing coal or burning coal, that are externalized to the environment, to coal field communities. An example of an externalized cost would be black lung disease.
I thought we cured that.
Well, the goal of the 1969 Coal Mine Health and Safety Act was to end black lung, a scourge of coal field communities. More than 100,000 coal miners died of black lung disease before 1969. And subsequently, since that act was passed, tens of thousands more miners have died from black lung disease. And in fact, the National Institute of Health has documented that the incidence of black lung disease among the nation's coal miners in West Virginia, both in underground and surprisingly in surface mines, is increasing. And so the Obama administration was considering ratcheting down the amount of respirable dust allowable in underground coal mines.
Respirable dust refers to the particulates that you can breathe in and that will cause damage to your lungs.
Simply coal dust.
Coal dust.
And with modern underground mining, there's also rock dust. When the longwall machine cuts the coal, it also cuts rock. And so the incidence of black lung and silicosis among West Virginia's miners and miners in the United States is increasing. And there's a cost. And interestingly enough, there are many externalized costs of coal. Black lung is one, and we can quantify that. From 1970 until I believe it was 1995, $41 billion was paid in black lung benefits to coal miners who suffered from debilitating black lung disease. Black lung disease can squeeze the breath out of coal miners and ultimately kill them. It's a nasty, scurrilous disease that is totally preventable. And so $41 billion, I mean, that's a quantifiable cost, but the cost to families of coal miners, the suffering of the coal miner themselves, the loss of communities is incalculable. You can't put it in dollar terms. That is a externalized cost of coal mining. And sadly, the so-called war on coal includes criticism of the Obama administration's consideration of lowering the respirable dust standard to protect miners working in underground mines. And just recently, just last week, the Obama administration, after 5 years of consideration and after 20 years of the National Institute of Health saying you should reduce by half the amount of coal dust that miners breathe in the mine, the Mine Safety Health Administration promulgated a final regulation, but it didn't even meet the NIH standard, 1.5 milligrams of coal coal dust instead of the 1.0 recommended by the National Institute of Health. That doesn't seem to me to be an administration that doesn't care about coal miners, but I question why the standard wasn't reduced to 1.0 as the National Institute of Health suggested. So that's an example of externalized costs. What are the other externalized costs when underground coal mining and surface mining takes rural West Virginians' spring and well water? Acid mine drainage coming from coal mines, air pollution that degrades the health of those who are living in the plume of coal-fired power plants.
Well, it's not just coal-fired power plants, it's the actual extraction of the coal that causes air pollution too. Just this past February, West Virginia University released a study that links mountaintop removal to air pollution, causing a greater incidence of respiratory and cardiovascular disease, cancer, birth defects, and premature death in the communities around the mountaintop removal sites. So there are things being put into the air, rock dust, coal dust, that the people who aren't mining it are breathing, and they're suffering effects from it too.
Well, I think those studies are not definitive. I think they suggest a correlation between coal mining and adverse health effects on neighboring communities. But further study is needed, and those who are waging this public relations campaign about the war on coal totally dismiss the possibility that there are health effects on those who live near large-scale surface mines. And I think that's wrong. We ought to err on the side of safety. We ought to investigate and determine if there are effects and do what we can to minimize them.
We're talking about the war on coal. My guest is Patrick C. McGinley, the West Virginia University College of Law Judge Charles Hayden Professor of Law. But we can spend money to clean up the air above ground, underground, but there are people in West Virginia, Kentucky, everywhere coal is mined, that are scared to death for their way of life. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They may, in fact, be willing to trade a few years of life or a disease for themselves, even for their children, just so they can continue to make a living. And what can we tell them that makes it okay?
Well, we can't say anything that makes it okay. What we can do, or rather what leaders can do in business and industry, in politics and in communities, is look forward to determine how to diversify our coalfield economies. In Kentucky, just very recently, there was a meeting in Pikeville where 1,700 people showed up to talk about how can we transition to an economy that includes coal, but diversifies and brings other jobs. And the diversification of coalfield economy should be a priority in Washington, in state legislatures, in the coal fields. The work that coal miners have done and the price paid by coalfield communities for a century ought to be worth something. And notwithstanding the Obama administration's efforts to protect public health and safety through environmental and mine safety regulation, they're not doing anything, nor is members of Congress, nor our state legislatures looking to develop ways to reinvigorate, to bring new industry to coalfield communities. And if there is a hope, it is that leaders will emerge that will do that.
But everyone running for any office, from a county committee person to a governor to a congressman to a senator, everyone says, I'm going to bring more jobs. I'm going to make it better. I have a plan to do these things. and nobody does, or at least it never seems to work out.
Well, that's my take on it as well. But
I mean, I think these are people of goodwill.
Yes.
They want to do that. If they could bring in another Toyota plant or a marble factory or whatever it happened to be, they would do that if they could. And there have been some good successes of that from some of our elected officials. As an example, Senator Rockefeller had an education founded in Far East cultures. He used that to some advantage to bring investment into West Virginia over the years.
Right, he certainly has done that, and Senator Byrd as well. Let me read something that Senator Rockefeller said about the war on coal on the Senate floor recently. He said, "The reality is that many who run the coal industry today would rather attack false enemies and deny real problems than find solutions." He called on industry to embrace a lower carbon economy. This is what he said, quote, "Scare tactics are a cynical waste of time, money, and worst of all, coal miners' hopes." And I agree with that. I think it's important, though, to make clear that coal will continue to be an important part of West Virginia and Central Appalachia's economy going forward for decades. There will be some jobs lost around the edges because of environmental and safety regulations. By and large, however, the loss of market share of the coal industry is attributable to the boom in shale gas production. It's cheaper than coal. Coal finds it difficult to compete with the massive production of shale gas. Moreover, 56% of coal-fired power plants in this country currently comply with the new standards that the Obama administration seeks to impose with regard to coal combustion. The declining use of coal to power electric generation is a result of the grandfathering in 1970 of old technology coal-fired power plants. And so here we are 50 years later, and there are power companies that use modern air pollution technology that will continue running, that will continue to accept and burn coal. And what we have to do is invest in new technology. Congress had an opportunity, the coal industry had an opportunity in 2009, 2010. There was a bill before Congress supported by the Obama administration that would have spent billions of dollars investing in carbon capture and sequestration of air pollution emissions from coal-fired power plants. And the coal industry failed to support that. That was an opportunity. The opportunity is still there. It's not hopeless.
Wouldn't something like that create an awful lot of jobs in retrofitting old plants?
Of course it will. And let me make clear, our state and Central Appalachia have experienced a boom-bust economy from the beginning of the 20th century. When I came to West Virginia to teach in 1976, just down the road from western Pennsylvania, there were 80,000 coal miners working. And today there are a little over 20,000 coal miners working. And about the same number as were working when President Bush left office. We've lost tens of thousands of jobs, and nothing was done to help coal-filled communities. We can deal with some job losses as long as there's a commitment to diversify our economy. Miners will still be employed, coal will still be mined, and coal will be burned in modern power plants where air pollution is reduced. That's the way to the future. What we need is this, as Senator Rockefeller said, is to stop the scare tactics. Senator Byrd said, "We have a choice to anticipate change and adapt to it, or resist and be overrun by it. But one thing is clear," Senator Byrd cautioned, "the time has arrived for the people of the Mountain State to think long and hard about which course they want to choose." And I think that's directed to the leadership, the political and business leadership of this state. We've got to embrace coal, mine it cleanly, burn it cleanly, protect the jobs that will remain here, and diversify our economy.
With all due respect to what Senators Rockefeller and Byrd said, do we have the political will to actually do those things? There are elements out there who would say, for example, why should we worry about this? Look at what's happening in India, in China, in Indonesia. They're burning coal and it's dirty. They aren't using modern technology to do it. They're using more and more coal each year. We're actually exporting coal to them because they can't satisfy their own needs. Why should we let them use our coal when we have to give it up ourselves and suffer the disadvantages of loss of employment and that sort of thing? Why do we take on the world's problems when the world around us is ignoring those problems?
Well, basically, that's a false choice, because if you look in the last 5 years, the use of coal to generate electricity has dropped from 50% to 38% because of competition with shale gas.
Of total energy production has dropped that.
Electric energy production. That's right. And so that wasn't any Obama administration regulations. They didn't go into effect. The power plants will be able to burn coal using modern air pollution technology. This is just a bogus argument. Some jobs will be lost. They've got to be replaced. We've got to have worker retraining. We've got to bring jobs and industry to the coal fields. There are thousands of acres that have been leveled by mountaintop removal mining in the southern West Virginia coalfield counties that are open there for development. In fact, when coal companies obtained permits to conduct mountaintop removal, they had to propose a post-mining land use required by the law to provide industrial, residential, commercial, or agricultural development. And that requirement of the law has not been enforced. We could have sustainable development if we're going to have mountaintop removal as an exception to the requirement that mined land be returned to its approximate original contour. There ought to be something left there that's sustainable, that produces jobs for West Virginians. That hasn't been done.
But industry nationwide is stopping. Manufacturing jobs are just going away. What are we going to put on these reclaimed sites? It seems like every time somebody proposes one of those plans, is, well, we'll put a shopping center here. Well, that shopping center is going to be in one of the most sparsely populated areas, not only of West Virginia, but of the United States. You can build a shopping center, but you can't put stores in it. The companies have to want to come here. You can say, well, this is a prime manufacturing site, but you have to have a company willing to come in here and manufacture something while manufacturing is declining. I mean, a golf course? How many golf courses can we support?
There's good news, Stan.
Well, let's hear it.
The good news is that manufacturing is coming back to the United States because of the shale gas boom. There's an increase in manufacturing activity. Shale gas, West Virginia is right at the heart, the core of the Marcellus shale boom. And so there's cheap natural gas available for manufacturing, and there's space available in West Virginia. And the second thing is we've got to spend on education. You know, if you go down and look at the coalfield counties, you see the highest unemployment, some of the worst schools in terms of physical structures, the worst public service. The billion-dollar coal fields, there's a sign when you drive into Williamson says, "Welcome to billion-dollar coal fields." Where's the billions? We've got to invest that money in West Virginia communities.
Well, but that money goes out of state.
Well,
every West Virginian knows that money goes out of state.
And a bright spot there, the legislature this year embraced the concept of a natural resource trust fund to take a severance tax of a small percentage of production of natural resources and put in a trust fund to accumulate funds and then pay for education, pay for economic diversification. That's smart. That's the way to go.
And West Virginia is putting fewer dollars into higher education than virtually anybody else right now. Our trend is to decrease funding of education while states around us and states across the nation are spending more money on it. Professor Patrick McGinley, Pat, thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure, Dan.
Thank you also for being with us on behalf of the LawWorks. I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook. On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes. The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law.
The LawWorks is made possible by major grants from the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. Additional support for the LawWorks is provided by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting,